Welcome to Dr. Akmal Makhdum's YouTube channel. He is a psychiatrist, a teacher of psychiatry, and a commentator on social issues. Today, we're going to be doing another episode on forgotten philosophies. And today, Dr. Akmal Makhdum has picked Hegel. What would you like to tell us about Hegel in this episode?
Now, when we talk of philosophy, one of the great names in modern philosophy, after the ancient philosophers, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, etc., Hegel is one great name. And an 18th century scholar and a professor and an author. And I have found massive relevant aspects of Eastern and Western thoughts in him. I would actually go as far as to say, which may be totally strange for many Western commentators of philosophy, that he was more a Sufi Western philosopher. I would not go into that, and maybe we shall talk about his concept of spirit and God and the infinite later on. But today we will just try to talk about basic principles. Um, the one thing that he talked about, and people do talk about, is the Hegelian dialectics. We will talk about that too. But today, let's try to encompass the basic thoughts and basic principles as a brief introduction.
Because you think it still has a relevance in today's society.
I would say that all this is extremely relevant in society. And why it is relevant, especially in today's world, is that I believe, and I think I'm sure it is shared by many other people, that Hegel's philosophy actually is a hopeful philosophy. Whatever you may read into it, Sartre borrowed the dialectics from him, and a lot of existential thought. Marx borrowed dialectics from him, and that is why there is a lot of talk about Hegel not believing in self and God. But obviously, coming from an Eastern mind, I would actually view him the way I see it, and many other people, not in the majority, have tried to see him in that Eastern sense. So, what we'd like to do is that today we would just like to encompass the basic principles, and there were a few, maybe on the fingers of one hand. So, the first that Hegel talked about was that whatever we find in ourselves, we will find in history. So, a lot of us will be found in history. What it means is that unless we look at our history, we will be oblivious of what mankind is, what humanity is, and what we are. So today, this idea that we are in a modern world, that we are so advanced, we can fly on supersonic jets, we can, be talking, and we will have millions of audience world over. But we look at our past 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1400 years ago, 2000 years ago, as something which is totally alien to us. But what Hegel suggests is that we are actually a gradual process of all that what has happened throughout our history. So we must not look back with a sense of derision or a sense that we are far advanced and other people were primitive. But what he suggests is that we will still find our humanity, still find our being what we are, our science, our chemistry, our nature in uh, in our past.
Okay, interesting. So do you think that we are quite dismissive of our past and we don't actually give it credit, due credit?
It is obvious, isn't it, that when we look at our past, we are constantly suggesting that it isn't relevant because although there are some spiritual aspects which we may want to suggest that are relevant, and then we try to incorporate them in our modern world, but what is so relevant that we see in our current day, which we feel was during the Mughal time or the Tudor time, there isn't anything.
Okay.
But what is it that you see is common? What is it that you see in human nature?
Okay.
I give you an example. Many years ago, in my adolescence, when I was reading Plutarch, and I was looking at the politics and the bribery and the corruption of the elite during that time, during Roman time, or during the Greek time, during the, when their interactions with the Persian Empire, it is as if I were reading today's history. And I was absolutely struck by the fact that human beings haven't really changed.
Okay.
The way they did things 3,000 years ago, they are doing the same things again. So what Hegel suggests is that although in many aspects we've moved on, but in many aspects there is this tendency for us to repeat ourselves again and again and again because we are human beings. And that is why we need to look at the past to try to understand bits of us, whether we can transform ourselves.
So maybe we do things again and again and again, like you said, because we are dismissive and of the past, and we don't take the lessons going forward. Like you said, every generation thinks they know best and they know more than the previous
Exactly,
generation.
and that was one example I was going to say, that the younger generation will tell the parents, Dad, Mom, you don't know what goes on in life.
Yeah.
Well, and then the parents look at the children as if they hadn't done the same with their parents.
Yeah.
So that is where we are constantly reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
And that is where Hegel suggests that it is the role of the historian
Okay.
to actually search from history. It is not to describe history alone, but to search from history what history is relevant to today.
Okay.
And that is why, some 70 plus years ago, mankind almost eradicated itself by the World War and the Holocaust occurred. But what have we learned since then? Aren't there Holocausts or similar genocides occurred in our lifetimes? The Srebrenica massacres and others. So all I'm trying to suggest is that human beings, we need to look at history and, sort of throw that hook and line to find out what is relevant to us. And that is the role of the dynamic historian,
Okay.
to make it relevant for us.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left. So what is it about another elements of Hegel that we
Okay.
should all know about?
The other thing that Hegel said, and it's very good, I feel, and it is relevant for today, is to learn from the ideas that you do not like,
Okay.
the ideas that are contradictory to you. So if you have an idea and you are absolutely convinced about it, then I think it is important, and that, well, not I think, but Hegel thought, was that it is very important to look at other ideas which do not match it, which are not identical to it, which do not synthesize with it.
Which challenge it as well.
Challenge it, even contradict it.
Okay.
So that's where the dialectic occurs, where an idea comes in and another idea, whether it is from inside or from outside, comes and clashes with it and contradicts it, and something new occurs.
Right. So within this day and age, we're not good at that. We try to silence voices that are different, especially contradictory. You know, you have this battle within the media of the left wing and the right wing, the extreme right, and then, as the right wing say, the snowflake left, etc. And you know, there's cancel culture. If you've said something we don't agree with, then we will take away your platforms and you have no right. So how do we apply this element of his theory, philosophy, to our lives?
Now, but this is important, that when humanity is constantly a product of that, and this is what he says as well, that progress in history and how human beings develop is this constant clash of the opposites. So, on the one hand, you have immense freedom, history where the philosophy of total freedom and absolute ability to do whatever the individual wants, and on the other, total oppression. On the one hand, sort of proportional representation and democratic institutions, and on the other hand, extreme dictatorship and absolute monarchy. Now, these do not tally, but they do coexist. Human beings coexist. And so the important thing is for all these to clash with each other as far as ideas are concerned. So from the fascist movements in Italy and Germany, during the 30s and 40s, to absolute liberal democracies, there was a clash, and out came a system. And there were followers who would not stand any opposition to fascism. And there were followers who would not stand any opposition to the extreme liberal democracy. So while at the same time we see that the fascists in Germany were attacking the communists and socialists, at the same time we saw that the liberal democracy in the United States was also attacking the socialists and communists.
Okay, interesting.
So there is this strange similarity and familiarity with history. And what Hegel says is you need to allow these clashes to occur, and preferably peaceful clashes, unless, of course, there is this murderous fascism which is trying to overtake the world. But the important thing is that you need to look at all this as something which will actually deliver something better.
Okay.
So you had, extreme oppression of the feudal system. You still have feudal systems in certain societies. But of course, when the feudal system clashed with the serfs, and when the Chinese feudal fought with the Chinese peasant, out came the Chinese communism, and out came the new radical and dynamic industrial China, and out came a much more liberal and now industrialized and almost a capitalistic China. So that is where it is relevant. So without that feudalism and the clash of the peasant with the feudal, the current developed China would not have occurred.
Right.
So the feudal China and the communist China was as important and relevant to China as it was. So that was the second bet.
Okay, and we actually only have 1 minute left, but so this could be applied to Pakistan.
It is.
So we probably need a clash, a peaceful one.
Yeah, well, ideally a peaceful one.
Yeah.
Ideally a peaceful one. But the thing is that many times when oppressors and the feudals and the the monopoly capitalists become too greedy, that is when they actually invite a physical challenge.
Right.
So it is very important. Now, this is why it is important in today's world that because we are now at a halt, COVID has actually applied a brake. And what we must do is for the feudals and the monopoly capitalists to think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. If you like the video, please click the like button, subscribe, and share. And if you have any questions, please leave them in our comment section. We will be doing an episode answering all of those. Thank you so much for joining us.